But let's come back to the country first. And we want to start off with that horrific incident that took place early this week on Monday. 8 lives needlessly lost. And here we are again. I think perhaps we'll begin with the guest in the room. How do we find ourselves here? I remember covering the Huruma tragedy, where over 50 people died. I mean, we did 13 straight hours of coverage, and it was heartbreaking. And there were several others, even in Huruma. And here we are again. How?
I think the problem is that as a country, we don't seem to learn. We are very reactionary in terms of how we do our things. This particular tragedy has been very unique in the sense that we have both national government and county government responsible, because schools are actually regulated by national government. Mm-hmm. And as a building within the county is regulated by the county. And the same question we've been asking, that how is it possible that you'd have this type of a building with 2 oversighting authorities and the others? We have the NCA, we have NEMA, we have the rest. How are you able to have this type of quality of developments in the country and nobody actually sees it? The point I made then, and the point I've made on this particular matter, is really that we have an absent government. Granted, this is a private school, and filling a gap simply because of an absent government that has not done anything from the 80s in terms of development. But on the other hand, it is government that regulates. So it is very easy for government to say these are the standards that private school providers must meet. And government is abstaining from that. We are seeing all over the country. These sort of shark schools. And they pass exams. And they're actually licensed by the ministry.
Indeed. Hold that thought, because that license was actually revoked today. But I'd like us to listen to what the Cabinet Secretary Magoha had to say when he visited the site on Monday following the collapse. In fact, we'll come back to you, Prof, in a moment, because you also visited the site, so I'd like to know what your thoughts are. But let's listen to CS Magoha. Just when this event had taken place on Monday, he visited the site, and this is what he had to say.
Through my ministry, is going to continue to monitor and assure the safety of all our children, who, in my opinion, are all the same, irrespective of where they come from.
Yeah.
Good assurance. Good assurance, but that's why it ends. Because had that incident not occurred, we wouldn't be seeing the kind of activity we are seeing today.
Correct.
Closure of schools. So far 3 have been closed. Other than Palma. There's another one in Kangemi, if I'm not wrong.
And then of course Precious.
Okay. But the 3 schools are symptomatic of what is happening in very many parts of the country. Correct. I mean, across the country, in the last 3 days or so, you've seen the kind of footage that we've been seeing from all over the country on the dilapidated schools.
State of the schools.
And all these schools have been going on without anyone talking about them until this situation occurred. So means if this didn't happen, then it would have been business as usual.
And you talked about, just before you come in, Linus, did the county or county governments know, and the national government? In fact, they seem to have known, because this school had a license, which was today revoked. Here's the CS again with the revocation.
The high enrollment and lack of adequate safe physical facilities, coupled with non-compliance to other standards like qualified teaching staff, sanitation facilities, and SIRS, rendered the available registration certificate null and void. The Office of the Director of Criminal Investigation, the DCI, who is going to be invited to carry on further investigation with regard to possible criminal culpability of the proprietor.
Sounds so familiar, Linus, doesn't it?
You know, Yvonne, it has been 56 years of independence. 56. Even a 56-year-old individual is supposed to display some adult conduct.
Correct.
In terms of decision making, in terms of solving problems. Now, 56 years of independence, and we have kids dying under those circumstances. What is the meaning of our independence? What is the meaning of our independence? If children can actually die, a wall can come down on them just because we can't follow what it takes to run a modern state, which is laws, rules, regulations.
Correct.
How did that building go up in the first place?
Correct.
Somebody's using...
Who approved it?
Exactly.
Somebody's using chain link, chicken wire mesh to make a floor. Even logically, I mean, this is madness. How did that pass there? But then it comes to the second question, which must bother a lot of people up to this stage, and that is the quality of public education.
Education, correct.
This country, government, year in, year out, over the years, has progressively been abdicating.
Thank you.
The public education space.
Correct.
Handing it over to private hands.
Correct.
Countries don't operate that way.
Exactly.
And then they turn around and start promising housing.
Correct.
Start promising things that you cannot handle. Adult governments handle education. You don't abdicate that space. You don't give it away to the private space. You go to developed nations, the most quality education comes from public schools. They invest in public schools. That is where governments prove that they're in charge of things. You start by training yourself on managing education.
Right.
This is a very, and honestly, I'm quite upset as a Kenyan this evening, because this is not news. These are not incidents. This is a shame. It is an indictment of 56 years of independence, that a child can go to school and come back as a body in the evening because you don't have a government that can keep it safe for them.
It's a question of priorities. Priorities in the sense that look at our budgets every year. Let's say in the last 10 years or so. Look at where the bulk of the money is allocated. When you still talk about government officers going on trips, what do they call them? Benchmarking. Okay, so what do they
over now.
What do they benchmark? Because ordinarily you would have expected that when people go out there, they learn from best practices and come and implement them back here. So if you're spending billions, like I saw in the last financial year, about 5.6 billion shillings by county assembly members for foreign trips, that's a huge amount of money that can go into infrastructure development for our schools. Not so long ago, we invested billions in laptops, and there were still questions that were being asked. For example, for children who are learning under a tree, what is the priority? A roof over their head or a laptop? So it's a question of priorities. I think we have enough resources as a country to do very many things.
Absolutely.
It's only that a lot of this money goes into waste. And let me repeat again what the Auditor General said in his exit report about 2 weeks ago, that every financial year, at least 1 trillion shillings cannot be accounted for. We are not saying it's being stolen, but the fact that he's saying it cannot be accounted for means a good amount of it goes to waste.
Out of a budget of 3 trillion, so that's a third of it.
Even if it was a half, 500 billion shillings can build very many classrooms.
I mean, and it's just about that report that I came across that was presented to the governor then, talking about schools that have not been built. No public school has literally been built since the 70s and 80s in Nairobi County alone. Prof, we'll talk about with you investment in just a moment, but you went to the site and Linus had talked about chain link fence. What did you see as an architect about how the school was constructed?
It was very interesting, Yvonne, and of course, let me just share now a bit of my shock not about the construction, but about destruction of evidence.
Right. Yes, you'd mentioned that.
People were actually cutting away the building. But by 10:30 in the morning, the entire building had been moved to a corner. Fortunately, I had done quite a lot of documentation of this particular building. Here was a building with no foundation at all. And then there was these 10 timber posts, 75 by 75, that's what we call them, the very, very thin timber posts. And the proprietor then did a first floor. And the first floor was made of offcuts. Offcuts are those timber pieces used on the walls. I mean boundary walls. So, and I think that then the guy became ambitious. He decided that on top of the offcuts, he'll now put the chain link, and then he cast a slab. First, the timber could not even carry its own weight. Then he put concrete on top there. The concrete could not be carried by this
wood.
Basic structure. And the structure was going to come down anyway, one way or another. The weight of it, I mean, is the most nonsensical thing. I'd never known that such stupidity actually exists outside there. I mean, how do you cast a slab and there's nothing to carry it? There's no column, there's no foundation, there's nothing. Yeah, because you see, these guys...
And then you add on the weight of now the humans.
Then you add on the weight of the humans. So you have these kids walking up and down,
wow,
you know, creating vibrations and so on. So the building was going to collapse anyway, one way or another. But having said that, yeah, so I went to the site, I did very thorough documentation of what was happening on the site, and whether the fellow talked about a sewer line being constructed or not was neither here nor there, because in an event that structure was going to collapse.
Was not sound.
Anyway.
Right.
But having said that,
yeah,
I've been moving around quite a bit of the slum schools, and there are very many such structures. Maybe not concrete, but there are very many such structures. One of the questions we're asking ourselves is, why do you regulate buildings? Why do you need approvals for any building? The answer to that question is about safety. And the next question we ask is then, who is the most unsafe? These guys in the informal settlements, people living in vulnerable spaces, these are the most unsafe. And these are the ones in Kenya that nobody bothers about.
Yeah.
So our entire development control is nonsensical. In fact, it's only that we are a country that only worries about politics. But I see a possibility of somebody going to court and saying the entire Kenyan development control is unconstitutional to the extent that it does not protect
the vulnerable.
The vulnerable.
And I just saw you shaking your head when we were showing those pictures of, you know, that mother just collapsing. I mean,
yeah.
It just tells you about the vulnerable.
It's terrible.
Right.
It's it just paints the picture of how we treat the poor in this country.
Exactly.
That is their fate. For those in decision-making positions, these are mere statistics.
Correct.
It's over, you know. And there's one thing that really should be found insulting of the poor. This offer by government people to take care of funeral expenses.
There you go.
It's the last insult.
Exactly.
In my view. And it's taking root. You know, you come and make it as though it's something that can give some relief to the family, or maybe it can resurrect the dead. It's an offer of insults. Don't make that offer.
Indeed.
Just do it and do it quietly.
Right.
Don't make it
Don't
as
make
if
it
it's
public.
a gift to these people.
And now that you speak about that, we want to take a break. But when we come back, we'll talk about what Citizen TV mentioned a little earlier this week. Disaster celebrities. That's right. We're talking